I'm tying up a real no-frills kind of leech pattern today. This is called the Bunny Bass Leech. Let's get that name, the bass, and the bunny flipped around. But anyway, there's a lot of different leech patterns out there. This is using some rabbit, like many of them do. But there at least is an interesting little tip that I've got in terms of tying this zonker strip in and keeping it from getting fouled up in the gap of the hook when you're fishing it. Now for this particular one, these zonker strips, sometimes you get them and they're a little bit wider and a little bit narrower. Probably could have picked a wider one, maybe even going with a magnum strip, because the crosscut that I have is very, very full. So keep that in mind. You could potentially go with something a little bit bigger, but once this is in the water, all of this will kind of lay down and flow all together, and it's a very productive warm water fly. I'm certain it would do well in cold water circles as well. So that is the Bunny Bass Leech. I'll get started tying. Start the Bunny Bass Leech with my hook in the vise. This is a Mustad 3366 in a size 2, a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and debarb the hook. So I'm going to debarb the hook, and then first thing I'm going to do before I even attach my thread, I'm going to attach the zonker tail on this leech. I'm using a regular, this is just an olive rabbit zonker. I want this kind of long. Because we're going to put some dumbbell eyes on this, it's going to flip it over. I want to tie this in up on the underside like this. That way when it rides in the water, this is the hair or the fur is pointing up. Anyway, I have to, in order to do that, I have to pierce the hide here, and I have to advance this around the bend. So after I debarb the hook, I'm just going to use the hook, pierce that, then I can take my hook back out of the vise. You can do this ahead of time, even before you put the hook in the vise, but for the video, that's just the order of things that I did. Now I can put my hook back into the vise here, securing that down. There are numerous different ways that this fly can be tied. It is a very popular warm water fly. There's lots of different leech patterns that use, rabbit zonkers and things like that. So for thread, I'm using a UTC Ultra Thread 140 Denier in a olive color. I'm going to attach this to the hook shank about an eye length or so behind the eye of the hook. Doesn't have to be exact. Advance this down the shank, kind of pushing that zonker out of the way, because this is going to be in a position now to tie in that zonker. I'm going to bring this back underneath, and I just want that rabbit strip to be in line more or less with the shank, just over the bend a little bit. Bring my thread around, and I'll start to secure that on the underside, putting in some wide wraps here just to secure that to the underside, and then advance my thread down to the end of the shank, and that will secure in the tail for our Bunny Bass Leech. Now, if you've tied any leech patterns or anything like this before, one common issue that you run into when fishing these is the tail will get wrapped around in casting. It gets wrapped around into the gap of the hook like this. If left like this, you are constantly going to have to unwrap that before you're casting and things like this. There is a number of different ways to mitigate that and get around that. I'm going to show you a very simple one. I'm using this is some 30-pound hard mason monofilament. You can use whatever fancy, regular, cheap monofilament, 30, 40 pounds, something fairly stiff. And what I'm going to do, one way you could do this is you can lash this down to the hook shank and then put some Zap-A-Gap or CA glue, super glue, along the hide and glue this to the back here. I find that I get all the hair in the glue and everything, and it ends up being very much of a mess when I do it that way. But what you want to do is essentially transfer this hinge point right here further down so that this is less likely to wrap around and foul up into the gap of the hook. So I am going to, about a half a shank length down here, I'm going to pierce a hole into that hide. Then I'm going to insert the end of this monofilament right into that hole that I just made. Can't find where it was. There it is. It's easier if you do this after you put this in and you pierce that. Let it sit there, kind of widen that a little bit, and then ease up what you're holding there to before that kind of closes on itself, and get your mono in there. Now, then I'm going to extend this maybe about a 1/4 inch, at least 3/8 of an inch through that hole. And I'm just going to leave that hanging out there. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to trim away the mono up here further up the hook shank, securing that in, and then wrapping all of that down along the hook shank. The reason I left this long is because sometimes if it's very, very short, the hide can get stretched and pop over that. If it's too long, there's no problem, because at this point, what we can do is we can trim that back. I'm going to cut maybe about half of that off of there. So now I have enough to transfer that hinge point further back here, and it is less likely to foul up in the gap of the hook. You can leave this long for now. After we put the body on here, we'll trim that more or less to kind of scale with the body. I'm going to advance my thread forward, and I'm going to tie in my dumbbell eyes. I'm about 2 eye lengths behind the eye of the hook. I'm just using some painted lead dumbbell eyes. These are a red with a black pupil. You can use whatever color suits your fancy for your leech pattern, because these patterns are very good in an olive, a brown, a black. I imagine you could even try and throw in some yellows or something like that. I'm going to do my crisscross wraps and then some wraps over the hook shank and under the lead dumbbell eyes to kind of wrap that together, bringing my thread back down. I'm going to put a little bit of fly tight head cement right on those wraps and underneath. It's just going to aid in holding it in securely on there. These will eventually kind of bust loose. Fly will loosen up from banging around on the bottom and everything, and they'll start to wobble and spin. There's other things you can do if you really want to anchor those in, but I find that this is enough. So our zonker tail's in, our eyes are in. Get those in right. Now for the body, I'm using a cross cut. This is just another dark olive cross cut zonker strip, and I'm going to tie this in with the hide side up, kind of facing me. I want to pull some of those hairs back. The reason that I tie that in with the hide side up is because when I start to wrap this away from me, it's going to put that hide side down, and then I just have all that fur along that strip that's going to make the body. And as I said before, these are very, very straightforward flies, simple to tie. Oh, nope, I tied that in wrong. Got too busy trying to walk and chew gum at the same time here. And you'll know it when you do, because what I did is, as you can see, when this flips over to the hide side down, all the hair is pointing forward. I want it the other way around. So I will, like I said, you'll know when you've got it in wrong. So just skip that mistake, because on the internet you can never make a mistake in fly tying. And keep in mind that we're going to tie this in hide side down. No, I know I've got the wrong end. Here's what I need. See, I've got one end here where it's all going to my left and all of the hairs are pointing down. And I've got the other end here. When the hide's away from me, I'm holding it to the left, the hair's going up. If I tie this in this way, the hair all goes forward. But if on the other end, I tie this in with the hide side up, when I wrap it around, the hair's all going back. So that's where my mistake was. Oops, not my mistake. So forget all that other part, and this is where we're going to tie in our body. Hide side up, but in this case, I had forgotten you want to tie it with the hide side up, but you want the hairs pointing away from you when you tie that in. So that's the correct end to tie in. Advance my thread up right behind the dumbbell eyes here. Now, when I flip this over, see, all that hair is pointing rearward. And pretty much there's enough of it that it's going to cover up any of that monofilament that we have, helping our tail to not get fouled up. Just keep wrapping this forward. Occasionally you'll have to swipe the fur rearward so that it's not getting trapped in. Now I usually will put a couple of wraps right up here, trying to thicken this up just a little bit right around the eyes. There's a couple of things you can do. You could actually just tie this off and fish it just this way once we do this. But I like to put a little bit of fur around the eyes just to make it look a little bit more complete. You can do that a couple of ways. You can simply put some dubbing on your thread and just dub around the eyes so that they look finished and polished. I'm going to use a dubbing loop, so I'm going to take some of this crosscut here, and I'm going to put this into a dubbing loop. I want to make certain I have a long enough dubbing loop to get a number of wraps on here to cover up all the thread and everything, and then a wrap or two to finish in front. Now when I do this, I put a little wax on my thread there. When I do this, there's a couple of ways you can actually insert this into the loop and then cut the hide off if you want. I prefer generally just to hold the fur in my hands and cut this off of the hide. You don't have to use the crosscut if you don't want to. You could just get some rabbit fur and do this. Then I'm going to open that dubbing loop up, and I'm going to slide this hair up towards the eye, up towards the fly here. I don't want to spin that yet because I want to get another clump of hair in here. Just take your time with it so that you don't open the gap up and that hair falls out. That's what the wax is for, by the way. I don't like a super tacky wax because I find that a tacky wax will get into the hair and it affects how it ties in and how it looks. So I'm just using the same wax that I use that I put on the thread. So I get another clump, open that loop up, just take your time with it, get that second clump in there. Take your time with this. It doesn't have to be, perfect. I mean, heck, I already made a mistake in the video, so I guess the whole fly isn't perfect anyway. With those 2 batches in there, I'll spin my dubbing loop tool, spin up that thread to make my dubbing loop, get any loose fibers out of it. I should say my dubbing brush, not my dubbing loop. And then I'm going to get a wrap right around behind the eyes like that. And then I'm going to get a couple crisscross wraps right across here. And then I'm going to get a couple, maybe 2, 3 wraps right in front. And it's just going to kind of fill it out a little bit, that's all. Secure that loop with my thread. I can then trim away the rest of that dubbing loop. Sweeping all of this back, put my head in for the fly. That's just to secure it a little bit. I wouldn't put any head cement in just yet because this stuff, the hair goes everywhere. And it tends to kind of get stuck in that head cement there. So I'm going to kind of brush this out just a little bit with my fingers. It doesn't have to be just perfect. And here's where I'm going to just kind of trim this back a little bit. All I want is just a little bit of a swept back head on this. It doesn't have to be real tight. This isn't like deer hair or anything like that. You're just cleaning that up a little bit so that it has a little bit pointier profile up front. But as you can see, the hair has covered up all those thread wraps. It makes it look a little bit more polished. Plus the fact, as this is swimming in the water, it's going to look more like, the narrow head of a leech. All the hair is actually going to kind of lay down as it swims and pulses through the water. Hair goes everywhere, especially up your nose. Don't feel you have to keep trimming on this. Once you get it more or less the way you want it, that's good enough. But this is why I didn't put any head cement up there just yet, because this little hair just gets everywhere. Now, before I put the head cement on there, we're going to trim our tail. It's up to you. I tend to like a little bit longer tail on these, so I'm going to about a full hook length, which is in front of the eye to the bend of the hook from where it's tied in. I'm just going to cut the hide here. Now, I'm not cutting straight through with my scissors because I'll cut the hair too. I'm just sawing that hide with one edge of my scissors to just cut that hide off. These scissors they cut very, very well, but they don't have, these are serrated, and therefore they tend to cut through the hide a little bit better. See, I cut through the hide, but I keep the longer hair right there. I don't cut that off. Now, I'll put some head cement on our Bunny Bass Leech. So this is just kind of a no-frills leech pattern, great for warm water species. I'm certain that if you had some trout waters where they're keying in on leeches and crawdads and things like this, I'm certain it would do very well. Probably even kind of double as a sculpin pattern. That is the Bunny Bass Leech. Thanks for watching today. Thank you for joining me at the Vise today. I hope you learned a new pattern, at least a tip or trick here and there. If you'd like to help Dress Irons, you can like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things for the video. You can also head out to dressedirons.com where you can buy flies, tools, stickers, and merch, or you can join a growing community over on Locals at the Dressed Irons Fly Tying Guild. You can also donate to Dressed Irons if you want through the link at the bottom of the description. I thank everybody for their ongoing support, as it really does help the creation of these videos. What's important is to remember, only fly tying. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.